What is up, y'all? Kevin Kuhn here from Athlete Factors. This is the Athlete Factors podcast. My guest today is Kristin Fant. She's a dietitian and nutritionist. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So, really excited to have this conversation with you today. I think based off some of your social media posts that we agree on a heck of a lot, which I'm excited about, but I'm also I understand where my lane ends, and I from a kinesiology and sport performance standpoint, I feel like I have a pretty good handle of nutrition, but I'm definitely not a dietitian. So I would love to learn a little bit from you today. So if you will, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal background, background in athletics and academics and all that.
Sure. So I'm Kristin. I am a registered dietitian practicing in the Dallas, Texas area. I'm a runner, and I actually did not used to be a dietitian. I have an undergrad degree from the University of Oklahoma in international studies, and I went into nonprofit management after college. So did a career switch after a few years. I got kind of tired of not really having like any tangible skills to help people with. And I had become really interested in running and fitness. And so that kind of led me to a degree in nutrition. So I have a master's in clinical nutrition from UT Southwestern here in Dallas. And I currently both work at a hospital in a clinical role, and then I also have my own practice that is focused on performance nutrition for runners and triathletes. Athletically speaking, I was not a very athletic child, so I did 1 year of cross country in middle school, and I hated it. So it is very, very funny to me now that I just love running so much. I got into it in college when I was studying abroad. I didn't have access to a gym, and I kind of wanted to see the city. So I just kind of started running for fun, and then over time, liked seeing like how far I could go and how long I could run for. I ran my first half marathon in 2011 and my first full in 2013. And now I am working towards a Boston qualifier.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's so funny how sometimes the things that we hate end up being the things that we love. Like
I think, it might have been a different experience if I didn't live in Texas, but cross country season, I do not understand why it occurs at the time of year that it does. Like August
late summer,
is not a good time to run outside. And our practices were in the afternoon. So that was a hard pass for me.
Yeah, so I coach a homeschool cross country team and track team, and like prepping for fall cross country is so brutal because you have to run during the summer in order to be conditioned for cross country in the fall, and it's so difficult you either have to be up super early in the morning and deal with the humidity, or you've got to run late at night and deal with the heat. Like it's rough. It's so rough.
It's the worst. I still hate running in the summer. I do it anyway now, but like I mean I basically just know that I'm going to feel like crap between May and September. So
it's rough. It's so rough. So where were you studying abroad?
I was in Florence, Italy.
Oh, that's so rough.
Yeah, it was a really hard time in my life.
Man, all those carbs. I'm sure it was awful. I'm sure the food was just the worst.
Yes. Well, that's probably part of the reason why I started running too, is because I was like, I feel like I'm eating a lot of food and not getting a lot of exercise other than walking places. But definitely had some problematic attitudes toward food at that time, but and did not know anything about, fueling for running, but I was just kind of doing like 20-minute jogs and stuff. So nothing too crazy, but yeah, it was a great way to see the city.
That's awesome. So The primary reason that I wanted to talk with you is because of let's call it the difference between eating to focus on performance
Hmm.
and focusing on like either weight reduction. Okay, so that's an awful way to set things up. Maybe a decade or 15 years ago, there was a book that came out called Racing Weight or Race Weight. I forgot.
Hmm.
It's by Matt Fitzgerald.
Yep.
Um, and I think that a lot of people didn't really read it, but kind of got attached to this idea of if I'm a certain weight, then I'm going to perform better.
Yeah.
And from like my perspective, that's putting the cart before the horse. Like, and so I was really drawn to your post just because it's like it's the same way that I feel about nutrition, at least in general, at least
Hmm.
on the surface level. You've got to eat to perform. And if you're focusing on that, then you're going to hit your PRs, you're going to have less injury, so on. You're going to have a healthier relationship with food, and so on and so forth. So, if you will, please tell us like your basic philosophy of coaching nutrition, and also, if you will, let's start with that, and then we'll go into the differences between clinical nutrition and performance nutrition and how you separate those out. So, but first and
Hmm.
foremost, what do you think? What do you feel about coaching nutrition?
Yeah. So for any nutrition coaching, whether it's clinical or whether it's performance based, I practice from an all foods fit perspective. So what that means is that any food can fit into somebody's diet, unless, of course, you're allergic to it or something like that. But if there's a food that you want to eat, there's a way that it can fit into your diet. I believe that you can love your food and take care of your body and also be an excellent athlete. So I don't think that you have to pick between your health and your athletic performance.
Mm,
And I think sometimes when you get to like a competitive level, there's a level of like, uh, well, I can't worry about, if my bones are strong or if I have a menstrual cycle, like I need to be fast. And so this is how I'm going to get fast by being as lean as possible.
mm,
Um, and I think that it's important for people to fuel for their training and for their body and not somebody else's. So just because your running partner has a certain diet that works for them, it doesn't mean that that diet's going to be successful for you. Nutrition should always be individualized, and I think that people will see the most benefit from having an approach that's individualized for them personally.
nice. Yeah, that it bugs me when I see like uh, someone within either the sport performance or let's say physical therapy, chiropractic, sometimes even the ortho uh, overlap, where all of these kind of professions overlap, and they tend to get stuck on one dietary type. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know I don't want to say names, but I know of a certain person who's like keto everything. Everything has to
Yeah.
be keto. My practice is this way. I recommend all of my patients or clients or whatever go down that route. And they personally may have had a ton of success with that, and so that's why they're so passionate about it, and I can
Mm-hmm.
totally understand that. But that's like using a hammer for every single job if you're a handyman. Like I just don't think that's a cookie cutter approach. Even if you can be flexible with a ketogenic diet, like it's just not going to work for some people. And if performance is your ultimate goal, then sorry, it's probably not going to end up too well for most people. Um, so yeah, that totally jives with me. The idea of everything should be individualized. That's great. That's good stuff. So how does uh, how does clinical nutrition and performance nutrition, how do these overlap? Like most dietitians that I know of are like 100% in the clinical setting. So how did you, I guess, not necessarily break out of that, but how do you have a foot kind of in both sides, and how does that work?
Mm-hmm. So my master's program was a clinical program. So we have like a really heavy emphasis on like practicing in a clinical hospital setting.
Hmm.
Um, that is that can vary from, you know, hospital to hospital and like what your specific job responsibilities are. But usually it includes some form of like nutrition support work. So like tube feeding and like feeding people through their veins when they're too sick and their guts don't work so they can't eat.
Hmm.
Um, we do like some diet educations, a lot of malnutrition screening. Honestly, I spend probably 75% of my time trying to convince people to eat more.
Hmm.
So a lot of people, when they hear dietitian, they think like food police and like, oh, she's going to judge me for what I'm eating. And like, she's going to give me a meal plan so I can lose weight. Um, and I, working in an acute care setting, I do very little weight loss counseling, partially because that's not my own personal philosophy, which we'll probably get into a little bit later, but also because it's just not very practical in an acute care setting. And most people, they're sick, they don't feel good, they're at the hospital. So they
Hmm.
really need to be eating more probably than what they're eating currently. Um, and then from a performance nutrition perspective, it has overlapping concepts. Like the fundamentals of nutrition and biochem are the same, regardless of like whether the person is sick or healthy.
Hmm.
But you know, being in performance nutrition, you're dealing with people who typically are healthy because they're running, they're active, at least like healthy to some extent. Some of them are not so healthy.
Hmm.
Um, and so part of it is, you know, again, trying to convince people to eat more, getting, helping them see that it's going to benefit them more to meet their needs versus trying to get by on as little food as possible. So that part of it is related. And then also, you know, coming from a clinical background, clients that have like food allergies or like digestive issues, cardiovascular issues, or like diabetes and things like that. That's something that a dietitian is trained and equipped to do. That, like, for example, just like a nutritionist or somebody that doesn't have like a formal training and certification, like may not have the capacity to do, because you do have to know a fair bit about nutrition and how the body works to really be able to give somebody proper counseling on what will work for them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another issue that I see with uh, like being in a cult of a specific diet. It's like, no, no, this can address all of your issues. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it probably won't. It probably can't. Like, no, 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 no. If you just cut out all your carbs, all of these health problems are going to go away. No, that's not how it works. Like, you
Yeah.
kind of have to know that, and I know enough to know that I don't know how to help you there. I need
Mm-hmm.
I need to outsource you to somebody who understands those things, who can actually address those things. Um, so yeah, that can be a tough one for people who know just enough about nutrition that they're dangerous. Um, and it's super easy to learn a little bit and be like, oh, well, I don't need to know anymore. This is everything that confirms what I believe. So
Mm-hmm.
this has all the
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about like being a dietitian, is that we have to maintain credentials by like getting continuing education certifications every year. So
Hmm.
I can't just say like, oh, well, I learned it and I'm good. You know, nutrition science is always a moving target. So we're always learning new things. We're always having a question like, you know, okay, we used to say this, like, is this still accurate? You know, they used to say, like, well, you can't eat eggs if you have high cholesterol. And like now we don't really recommend that anymore, because most people are not that sensitive to dietary cholesterol. So it's just one of those things where like there's always something that is changing, and you have to be willing to say, like, there's so much more that I still need to learn. Nutrition is one of those funky areas where like everybody eats, so everybody thinks they're an expert, and it can be like a challenge, especially with like performance nutrition and athletes, who are very prone to disordered eating habits and getting into like a really bad situation with like potentially like their food and their mental health, it can be a challenge to like combat that, because like a lot of times like really good solid nutrition advice is not very sexy. Like it's not just cut out these 10 things and like you'll be, running marathon PRs every year.
Yeah,
It's often like way less exciting than that, but if it works, I think it's better than just like doing something that's trendy. So
for sure. Most of the time, people want a quick fix and they want something that's gonna, change me tomorrow. Like I want to take this pill, wake up and in the morning, like be completely different. It just doesn't work that way. Like,
yeah.
unfortunately. So what's the best system for athletes? Like when we're looking at how you're, like, let's say you get a new client, and you're trying to help them. They want to either PR in the marathon, or they want to run. They've never run a marathon before, or let's say they're a first-time triathlete. Like whatever the case may be, I'll let you kind of pick which scenario you want. But what's like the basic way that you go about helping them?
So I mean, first of all, I think it depends a lot on the athlete. Like some people need more structure than others, and some people are dealing with different challenges than others. Somebody who is like training for their first endurance event, we're looking at like getting them to the finish line, right? We're not looking at like, okay, you're going to blow your last time out of the water, or like you're, trying to like shave 20 minutes off your marathon time or something like that. So that's a little bit of a different approach versus somebody who's like a seasoned marathoner, or like going for a specific time, or like really dedicating a lot to training, because, higher mileage, more effort, like more like structured workouts and stuff like that, you're going to have a different nutrition approach. Like you're probably going to need more calories, and you're probably going to need to be a little bit more mindful about timing of nutrients and stuff like that. I don't really recommend like any like specific diet, or like obsessively like tracking calories or macros or anything like that. I know that's like a very popular approach for a lot of athletes, and I have a lot of clients who come and they're very like married to their Fitbit or their MyFitnessPal, and they like cannot imagine not tracking anything. I do think tracking can be helpful if you genuinely have no idea where you're starting from. So a lot of times with new clients, I will have them kind of track for a few days to kind of give them a baseline. I might give them like some targets, or have them calculate some targets for like calorie needs, protein needs, carbohydrates, and stuff like that. Usually what we find is that they are falling short on something rather than they're overdoing it. And I think, that can be really helpful to kind of give you a baseline. But long term, I do really emphasize the importance of athletes being able to listen to their bodies, and use that as a better guide versus like being married to a specific equation or set of numbers. I tend to take kind of an intuitive approach with my own fueling and training. And I also recommend that for my athletes, because I think that food should be enjoyable. And I think that fueling needs to be sustainable. Like it can't be something that's just kind of well, I can do this for 5 days a week, but then the other 2 days I need to, go have fun. I think that like within, the framework of intuitive eating, which like in case you don't know, or in case your listeners don't know, it's a dietary framework that was created by a couple of dietitians in 1995. It's not a diet. It's not a weight loss approach. It's based on nourishing your body properly and purposefully, embracing a wide variety of foods, and eating without restriction. So, I think that that's kind of what I would recommend for most people, like overall in nutrition. And then with athletes, I think you do also have to kind of take a little bit of an approach of, there are specific times during your day when you need to eat certain things. And, you can do that within the framework of intuitive eating, because it's way more complex than just eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, which is kind of where a lot of people land on it. You have to think about like how this food is going to affect my body and affect my performance, and like, make choices based on that too. So like, for example, a lot of athletes don't eat after a run because their appetite's kind of depressed. That's pretty common. When you're running, your body is directing blood away from your gut to the muscles that need it more, like your heart and your legs. So you may not feel very hungry when you finish running. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to eat, because we know that, eating within a certain amount of time after a meal is the most beneficial for helping us recover faster. So that we can get the most benefit out of our workout, so that we can get fitter and faster. So you're not off the hook just because you're not hungry. But within that, you're making a choice that is meaningful for your body and purposeful fueling, which is also, aligned with the framework of intuitive eating.
Nice. So yeah, that's for me kind of the end goal for a lot of my nutrition coaching clients. Like it starts typically with a little more structure. Like most of my philosophy comes down to the idea that like athletes are way under eating. Like they are leaving so much performance and adaptation on the table because they're either in a calorie deficit or they're maybe at maintenance level, but like the cost of adaptation is higher than the caloric currency that they're ingesting. So at least for like periods of a macro cycle, like a big training cycle, like I want you to know exactly what your budget is, in the same way that like you have to know how much money you're making monthly so that you can pay rent, so that you can pay your bills, so that you can put stuff into your retirement, so that you can do savings, all that stuff. If you don't know how many calories you're ingesting and you're training intensely, then how do you know if you're optimally adapting and recovering and fueling? So I tend to be like a little more structured at least during certain times of the year when it comes to their training. But the ultimate goal is to work to where, man, if you're like excessively structured so much so that it's tyrannical, like you've got to weigh your food, you've got to track everything, you've got to like, that's not healthy, that's not good. In the same, like that's one extreme. The other extreme where you're not tracking anything and you have absolutely no idea, like that's not useful either. So if you can get to the point where in general, like there's these guidelines, I'm going to do my best to, shoot for them, but it's not so structured that like, oh, you know what, I was way off, I'm going to feel awful the rest of the day, I'm going to be upset because I didn't hit my goals. Like that ends up, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, I think. So, yeah, I think intuitive eating, like that's kind of how I do things personally now. Like I have in my mind a pretty good idea of like my protein goals. And so I shoot for a certain amount, before time periods within the day. Like I want to get, like 30 to 40 before my first client shows up in the morning. And then that kind of sets me up for the rest of the day so that if I have like regular lunch and dinner, I'm probably going to be relatively close just because I tend to go a little more protein heavy with my meals. And then I'm going to hit my protein goal for the day. And I don't have to track and I don't have to measure or weigh anything to know that I'm coming in pretty close. And as long as I'm consistent, my body's going to be way better off that way than if I was not tracking at all or if I wasn't focusing on that at all. So, yeah, I think intuitive eating is, it's a great goal for people to work for, just because you can't be tracking all the time. Like that's too much structure.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing. Too much structure or too much chaos. Like you want to be able to kind of work towards the middle, I guess, of that. So when it comes to intuitive eating, you've said that like there's nothing that's off limits. That's something that I think is super important, just because like when you look at behavioral modification, when you look at things like the brain's, I guess, response to, like, humans want to do things that they're not allowed to do. And like we like to break rules. So like setting up rules where specific foods are off limits tends to result in disordered eating. Is that safe to say?
Yes, I would say that that's accurate. Yeah.
Perfect. So can you tell us a little bit more about um, like what do you feel about quote unquote cheat meals? What do you feel about restricting specific foods? Like what does that do to, like, I guess, people in general? And then when you're working specifically with an athlete, like how can that be like detrimental? How can that like sabotage your ability to train intensely and recover optimally?
So, yeah, I'm not really a fan of food rules in general. I think, a lot of athletes kind of adopt that, like, oh, like 80/20, or like if it fits your macros or whatever, like that kind of philosophy. And it's sort of marketed as like oh, this is all inclusive, like you can have whatever. But I think, uh, first of all, I think if you have to cheat on your diet, then it's probably not working that well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, what happens when we restrict foods? As you said, that leads to disordered eating patterns. What it does is it makes that food more desirable. And, we tend to want the things that we can't have. If you put that kind of value on a food, like if you say, I'm never going to eat sugar again, well, I bet you're probably going to start craving sugar.
Mm.
Um, and what's likely to happen is that at some point you are going to be presented with an opportunity to eat something that you're not supposed to be eating, quote unquote, like according to your food rules. And you're probably going to overconsume it, and you're going to eat more than you would have to begin with. Then you're going to feel guilty, and you're going to, swear to never eat it again. And the cycle just kind of repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this a lot in like basically every kind of restrictive diet. Um, when we allow ourselves to have those foods and work them into our diet in a way that makes sense, they lose some of that power. So, like, I love ice cream. If I want ice cream, I'm going to eat it. I have a pint in my fridge that I bought a week ago at the grocery store, and I keep forgetting I have it, and I haven't touched it. Like, it doesn't, I'll eat it if I want it, but like it doesn't have any kind of like power over me. I'm not going to go eat the whole pint just because it's there. I'm going to
Yep.
wait until I want it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking away the emotional power of those foods, and we can only do that by letting ourselves have them. So it's kind of counterintuitive for a lot of athletes, because they think, well, if I let myself eat that, I'm just going to eat it all the time. Usually, when they've tried that before, they're still they still have some kind of a restriction mindset around it. Like, well, I'm going to let myself eat cookies, but I'm only going to eat one. Well, if you don't let yourself have as many as you want, you're never going to get past the part where like that food is off limits.
Mm.
So it can be really scary for athletes to kind of, or for anybody really, to kind of go through that process if they have a lot of those food rules. But ultimately, I think that sets you up for a better relationship with food, so that you can make decisions that are based on what sounds good to you, what will make your body feel good, what's best for your training, versus like what's available to you in the moment. Like if you never let yourself have fried chicken and you get fried chicken for dinner, you're not going to care that you have to run 20 miles the next day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even though that may not be the best choice for your body, you're probably just going to overeat that. And then, your run's probably not going to be that great the next day. So, I think that's a consideration as well. Ultimately, I think, again, anything that takes you away from listening to your body, like, macro counting and stuff like that. If you run out of macros, like, what do you do if you're still hungry? You
Mm.
have to break the rules, or
Mm-hmm.
just be hungry. And if you're hungry, that's a good indicator that you're not eating enough food.
Yeah.
Um, So it kind of like takes the trust away from your relationship with your body and puts it into like these arbitrary rules that are not usually grounded in very solid science.
Yeah, that can be a tough one if you're working with like a meal plan, or if you're using an app that calculates your numbers for you, then
Hmm.
yeah, like what do you do? Typically, my athletes don't have to worry too much about that because I'm like, hey, this is a rough goal. If you go over because you're hungry, then you need it. Like, don't feel bad about it. This is a good thing. If you've and at that point, um, this is all like calories that are going into savings that are going to pay for future adaptations. Like, this is okay. They can pretty much come from anywhere as long as you're hitting roughly uh, these goals that we have for specific macros. So, but that's a little bit of a side. So,
Hmm.
so tell us a little bit, like, how do you prioritize, uh, like calories, macros? Like, what emphasis do you place on that when you're working with somebody? Like, do you have rough goals that you're shooting for? Do you have ranges, or is it just like, hey, like, what do you tell them to focus on?
So, my priorities for my clients, again, it varies a little bit based on what they're looking for specifically. But generally speaking, we're looking at first and foremost making sure they're eating enough food. So, I mean, that's always going to be priority number one.
Hmm.
If they're not eating enough, like it does not matter how much iron you get. If you don't have enough calories, like your body is not going to be able to use it efficiently.
Right.
From there, typically I'm making sure that they're eating like a wide variety of foods, that they have a lot of balance in their diet. So they're not eating the same thing every day. They're not like, like restricting certain foods or certain food groups. And that can be something that we kind of work on over time because it's definitely not just like okay, now you don't restrict sugar anymore. Just like add that back in. It takes a little bit more time to work through that typically. Um, I do look at their macros and micros, and I do have ranges that I recommend. Sometimes I will give those to my clients and say, like, hey, this is what I want you to shoot for. If I have clients who are very triggered by macro counting or calorie counting, I will not usually share those numbers. I will talk to them about like making sure that they have like a protein, a carb, and a fat source and some color with all of their meals. And we'll talk
Hmm.
about the proportions of what that should look like depending on what their training load is like. It's not because it's like a secret. I mean, they can look up how to, calculate their calorie needs online. It's
Hmm.
just that I care a lot more about how their body feels and how their training is going than that they're hitting like a very specific number for me. Um, and part of that too has to do with the fact that we just don't need the same number of calories every day. I mean, if you run 20 miles today, you're going to need way more calories than you would on a rest day.
Hmm.
Now, if you're recovering from your 20-mile run on a rest day, you might need more calories than you think you do just because you're not working out.
Yep.
But our bodies have different calorie needs from day to day. And so, being too rigid on like hitting a specific calorie goal or like a specific carbohydrate goal um, can be kind of like it can just push them from like one area of disordered eating into another.
Mm.
So I am pretty sensitive of that with my clients. So like number one, I guess for me is like making sure they're getting enough energy, and then from there, you know, getting a wide variety of foods so that we know that they're getting um, the nutrients that they need from their diet, learning to listen to those hunger signals, learning to kind of identify how I feel before a run, how I feel after a run, like what impact this fueling choice made on my training. And, depending on like who they are and what they're dealing with, we might be looking at like, hey, I want you to add more like leafy green vegetables because we need to get you more like vitamin E and folic acid, or maybe, we need to add more protein if you like are not eating a lot of it, because we definitely don't want that either. But again, depends on like how they're feeling and what specific goals they're training for and what their background with food is too.
Gotcha. So are they like keeping a food log or a diary, or how do you go
Yeah,
ahead?
I have my clients keep a food journal for me.
Hmm.
Sometimes they will write down like, exact things like the brand or whatever, but I also have clients that just take a picture of the meal and send it to me.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really just for accountability so that I know what they're eating so that we can talk about changes that they need to make. It's not necessarily so that they can like have an exact like this is exactly what you're getting and this is exactly where we need to be from here.
Yeah, one of my strength and conditioning mentors, he's a college strength coach, and he had the hardest time trying to get his elite athletes to do any sort of like dietary logs or tracking. Like they just wouldn't do it. And so um, he just made it a rule, like take a picture of your plate before you start eating and just text it to me. And like that was one of the most useful things that he found, because then he can, if he needed to, like pull that athlete aside at practice and say, hey, here's your plate, here's where I want to see some change, let's make this adjustment, let's do this, let's cut
Mhm.
back maybe on this, let's add this in, let's adjust things here. And like that was super useful. So
Yeah.
that's one of
Yeah,
those
I
things
actually
that,
kind of like that pictures better because people are often very bad at estimating how much food they're eating.
hmm
They're either way overshooting it or way undershooting it. And so unless you are really measuring out everything, which I don't really think is necessary or beneficial,
hmm
um, the picture, I mean, it doesn't lie. Like that's what was on your plate. So
yep, exactly.
as long as I can tell what everything is.
Yeah. There you go. So can you talk a little bit about like the biggest issues, the biggest hangups, the biggest problems, I guess, that you come across working with endurance athletes when it comes to their diet or their nutrition?
Yes, I thought of a few. Um, one is definitely a fixation on weight and the idea that being lighter means being faster. I have a lot of trouble getting some athletes to eat more because they are convinced that if they eat more, they're going to gain weight
Mm-hmm.
and that is going to make them slower.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of along, and then within that, I think also a lot underfueling is a big issue. I very, very rarely have an athlete that is overfueling. Typically, if you care enough about your endurance sport to hire a dietitian to help you with your meals, you're probably training pretty seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And um, usually, if that's the case, you are not overfueling. But everybody always thinks they are. So um, I have a lot of I see a lot of people that get into the same like food ruts. They eat the exact same foods all the time, which can be a problem from like a nutrient adequacy perspective, and also because it tends to like reinforce a lot of rigidity. Like people get very anxious if they can't have like their food and they know exactly what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Following diet fads, like always looking for that magic bullet that's going to like be that kind of quick fix, like you were saying earlier, which does not exist. There is no quick fix that is going to magically make you like, 2 minutes faster on your tempo days or like suddenly make you like a sub elite marathoner. Like the only way to do that is to fuel like it's your job and train really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then on the other hand, like, I do get some runners, mostly people who are newer to the sport, who think that it doesn't matter what they eat because they're running and so they can just like have whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, like you can have whatever you want, but certain foods will have a more impactful um, benefit to your training than
Mm-hmm.
others. And then not eating during running, like long runs and competitions. So many people go through run a marathon on like one single gel, and it makes me crazy.
Yeah. So do you, what type of strategies do you suggest to your clients who are either doing marathon training or who are triathletes that need to, you can't really fuel on the swim, but like, what do
Mhm.
you have them focus on the bike and on the run?
So typically the general like starter recommendation is 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour
Hmm.
for any run that is longer than about 75 minutes or ride. So like any sport that you're doing for longer than 75 minutes. Um, so I usually will have them start fueling maybe about like 30 to 45 minutes in. Probably if it's a triathlete that's like actually doing a race, then sooner than later because they've
Hmm.
already gone through a swim.
Right.
Um, and then about every like 20 to 30 minutes thereafter. Um, on the bike, it's a little bit easier to use a wider variety of fuel or like in an ultra running setting where you're going pretty slow.
Hmm.
So I do encourage those athletes if they want to use real food sources. Sometimes those can be a little bit easier on the stomach, and they give you kind of some variety in terms of like palatability and flavor. Um,
And they
especially
don't
for
have to all be sweet.
Yeah, especially for ultra runners or like even slower marathon runners. Like if you're doing more than like a 4:30 marathon,
Hmm.
you may want to think about adding in like some different flavors because you do kind of get that sick gut feeling when you only eat like concentrated sugar for a very long time. And typically, when you're going at that pace, your body is using a little bit more fat as fuel because your heart rate's not quite as high. So
Hmm.
you can do that a little bit more efficiently. But for marathon runners, half marathoners that are running at a competitive pace, maybe like age group athletes or sub elites, I usually we definitely can use real food. I do that with athletes, and there's a few like different things that you can try to make it a little bit more portable. Um, but if I do think that there's like some dietitians are very like anti-gel and anti like sports nutrition, like few like sports
Like
nutrition like
supplementation.
right
Yeah. Hmm.
like goos and like stinger
Hmm.
gels and stuff like that.
Yep.
Um, and there's certainly like people who don't tolerate them well, but there are a lot of people that do well with them and can handle them, and they're usually much more convenient than trying to eat like a thing of pureed mashed potatoes like in the middle of a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of people tend to forget is sometimes things happen in the middle of a triathlon and you can have mechanical problems or you can just be not having a good day. You could lose a bottle, you can lose whatever food or nutrition you had planned, and now you're at the mercy of what's available on the course.
Hmm.
And that's probably going to be like what some people consider cheap, dirty sugar. And if you
Yeah.
don't know how to, if you haven't trained your body to utilize that in the middle of a marathon, then you've got to pick, okay, GI issues or just walking, like,
Hmm.
or crawling. Like, so that's one of those things that if I I know super high level triathletes who are like, why would I train with something that's not available on the course? Like if I need it, then it's there.
Hmm.
And then other people are like, no, 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 no. I want boiled potatoes with salt and I want my food. And then it's like, yeah, but if something happens, then
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's good to have some digestive resilience and flexibility there where you can kind of handle a bunch of different things and your body's going to know what to do with it.
Yeah,
No.
well, and a lot of people don't really think about the fact that you can train your gut. So, like, if you're very sensitive to like gels and things like that, like, that's okay. But you also have like this whole training block ahead of time where you should be practicing with your fueling and like
Hmm.
helping your gut learn to tolerate fuel while you're in motion. So, if you're going into a race and you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this, and you didn't practice it beforehand, or you haven't spent any time to like try and increase the tolerance for the amount of food that you can eat, then the issue is not the on-course fuel. The issue is that you didn't plan properly for your race.
Yeah. At that point, it's just a stressor that you have not conditioned your body to. And that's going to be tough. It's going to be hard for the body to deal with. So this is a little bit of an aside, but we talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on sugar in general.
Could you...
Is sugar bad for you?
I have a lot of thoughts on sugar.
Good. You should have a lot of thoughts.
No, sugar is not bad for you. So carbohydrate is basically a type of molecule that breaks down into glucose in your body. That's what your body uses as its primary means of energy. Certainly during aerobic exercise, during periods of stress, that's the only source that your brain can use as energy. And like any type of sugar, whether it's like from candy or whether it's from a potato or whether it's from like steel cut oats, essentially like the chemistry, like it all breaks down to the same stuff. And when it's absorbed into your body, some of it, like steel cut oats, are like bigger molecules, so they take longer for your body to digest and absorb, which is why it doesn't give you like a spike in your sugar like a candy bar or a lemonade that has like a lot of very simple sugar in it. But that doesn't mean that those foods are bad. It just means that they have a kind of a different purpose. Like that is what I recommend for athletes to use during competition or pre-competition, because it gets into your bloodstream quickly and it's readily available for you to use as energy. I mean, certainly I don't think that you should like be eating nothing but processed added sugar. But you know, it also tastes good and it's fun. So like that's a good reason to eat food sometimes too. Like it doesn't all have to be just because it's good for your performance.
Yes. Awesome. So yeah, that's
and
one of
by
those...
the way, it is not addictive. Which goes back to what we talked about before with the restriction and binging cycle.
Yeah. That's one of those things that people are really passionate about.
Yes, they are.
About their thoughts on sugar, and some people are like, no, you cannot have it. It's the worst thing for you. Like, okay, so I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts, and he's like every single time he's like, sugar's the worst thing. I don't eat any sugar. And then I'm like, you're eating carbohydrate. Like there's let's call it levels of quality. Let's say carbohydrate exists on a spectrum, but you can't even say that it's a quality spectrum, because it's just you can utilize a very quickly digested, highly insulinogenic carbohydrate for a specific purpose that's actually going to be useful, and that's within that training or competition window. Like that's the perfect time for it. Most of the rest of your day, you're probably going to be better off going with something that's a little more complex. But at the end of the day, it's all glucose. It's all broken down to glucose. Unless it's fiber, it ends up as glucose. So people that are like so anti-sugar, I'm like, man, your whey protein is just as, if not more, insulinogenic as tons of carbohydrates. So if the issue is sugar causes insulin spikes and that causes fat storage and that's bad for you, or whatever your ideology about sugar is, like I can give you a bunch of examples of other types of food that aren't sugar that do the same thing. So it's
and you know, that's also like kind of a limited view of the biochemistry, because
yes,
like, I mean, if you are not fueled well and you are chronically in an energy deficit, you're already causing like a very high stress situation for your body, which is making your blood sugar high, which is causing fat storage, because your body does not know that it's stressed because you're purposely underfeeding it versus stress because you're starving somewhere or you don't have access to food. Like your body processes it the same way. So I mean,
stress is stress.
Yeah, if you do that, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. You're making it harder for yourself to recover and you're still getting those negative health impacts. Like, even though you're staying away from processed sugar, like, it's not doing what you think it's doing.
Yeah, no, I think people, it's just one of those easy things. Like, oh, well, as soon as I cut out sugar, then my joints started feeling better. And so sugar is obviously inflammatory. It causes all this inflammation. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, if you're in a calorie deficit, but you are coming from a calorie surplus, then that's going to reduce a ton of inflammation. Like, if you were eating too much and you cut out sugar, was it the sugar, or was it that now you're just not overeating? Like,
Right. Or
are
were you
you?
eating other foods that are highly processed and are inflammatory that were then causing that reaction? And now you've switched your diet to include a lot of fiber and whole grains
Yes.
and lean proteins that
Right.
reduce inflammation. And that's why you're feeling better, because your diet is full of more nutritious foods now.
Kristen, things cannot be multifactorial. Okay. It has to be one specific thing.
Things can be
Otherwise,
more than one thing.
you're crazy. That's insane. I can't have this conversation with you. It's often so complex, right? There's often more than one thing going on. Like you said with
Yes.
biochemistry, there's a ton of different things all at play, all at the same time.
Yep.
That's crazy stuff. So, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Please share with everyone your social media handles, how people can follow you, how they can reach out to you if they want to ask you questions or if they want to work with you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at endurance.nutritionist. And you can also find me online. My website is kristinfantnutrition.com. And if you want, you can email me, kristinfantrd@gmail.com.
Awesome. Alrighty, y'all. There it is. So go follow Kristin. All the posts that I've seen have been either educational or thought provoking, or just like, man, why didn't I post that? Like, goodness gracious, that's good stuff. So, thank you again for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping at some point in the future, when this pandemic has come to a close, that we'll be able to meet in person. We're both in Richardson, so
Yes, the hood.
yeah, it's a good spot. So, yeah, I think that that about covers it. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. Alrighty, y'all. Go follow Kristin, and as always, stay tuned to next week's episode. Adios.